Jack Martin, 42, sat hunched in the glow of computer monitors in the airline's operations center. As an airline operations manager for a mid-sized U.S. carrier, he oversaw crew schedules and flight dispatches with methodical precision. The dispatch office bustled with radio chatter and keyboard clicks during the day, but late at night, it became eerily quiet. Tonight, the silence felt heavier. Jack's eyes flicked over the crew rosters for the upcoming week, and a familiar name pairing caught his attention. Maya Martin, lead flight attendant, repeatedly assigned on overnight routes with Captain Grant Reed. Jack's wife and a charismatic pilot, together on many flights. It might have been coincidence the first time, but this pattern was undeniable. His pulse quickened as he scrolled through past schedules. Dallas, Seattle, Miami. Flight after flight had them working the same trips. A nagging dread settled in his stomach. At 38, Maya was a senior flight attendant who knew the ins and outs of crew scheduling. Jack had always been proud of her professionalism. They'd met on the job nearly 20 years ago, when she was a junior stewardess and he a rookie dispatcher. Since their daughter left for college, however, husband and wife had drifted into a polite, aching distance. Jack worked late more often. Maya picked up extra trips. They told themselves it was temporary emptiness they both coped with in their own ways. But now, Jack wondered if those extra trips were with Reed by design. A bead of sweat formed on his temple as he stared at the screen. He rubbed it away, whispering under his breath, "No, she wouldn't." Still, the coincidence was too perfect to ignore. Captain Grant Reed had a reputation around the airline. Charming, confident, a tall man with an easy smile and thousands of flight hours under his belt. Jack had shared friendly beers with him in years past. Reed was popular, a bit of a golden boy of the airline. If Reed asked for a particular flight attendant on his crew, schedulers might oblige. He was known to mentor junior pilots and had friends in crew planning. Jack's mind raced. Was Reed mentoring Maya too closely? Why were they on so many layovers together? Jack's hand hovered over the computer mouse as he navigated through the scheduling logs. The interface reflected line after line of flights, dates, crew IDs, hotel info. If this was deliberate, they might have left traces. He accessed the flight logbook archive, a backup paper log that crews sometimes used when the digital system was down. Flipping through scanned pages on his screen from a recent system outage, he froze. There it was, in blue ink. Maya's neat signature alongside Reed's scrawl, both signing onto Flight 282's roster to Denver last month. That was supposed to be Maya's day off. Next to their names, a handwritten note. Crew substitution due to sick call. Jack's gut twisted. He knew for a fact no one had called in sick that day. He would have been notified. It looked like they had written themselves in during the brief scheduling chaos of the outage. He shut down the browser and leaned back, heart pounding against his ribs. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. To confirm his suspicions, Jack decided he needed hard proof beyond scheduling coincidences. He glanced at the clock, nearly 11 p.m. Most of the day staff were gone. Only a skeleton crew and night dispatchers remained, each absorbed in their own tasks. In the dim light of the ops center, Jack quietly opened a secure personnel database. As an operations manager, he had broad access. Tonight, he'd use it to reconcile crew logs against expense records. For years, Jack's job involved ensuring every flight was properly staffed and all crew movements accounted for. Part of that included verifying travel expenses. With a few keystrokes, he pulled up corporate credit card records for crew hotel stays. His throat tightened as he filtered the data. Maya Martin company card charges. Line by line, the charges appeared, each tagged with a city and date. Dallas, Hotel Crown, $189. Seattle. Skyway Suites, $210. Miami, Palms Hotel, $175. Jack cross-referenced these with Captain Reed's layover schedule. His eyes darted between Maya's expenses and Reed's roster. Dallas? Yes, Reed was pilot on that overnight. Seattle. Reed was there too. Miami. Reed. Every single one matched. A pattern of shared destinations emerged, stretching back 6 months. Jack clenched his jaw as the truth crystallized. Maya and Reed were arranging to fly together and stay in the same cities, likely the same hotels. Perhaps they requested common layovers intentionally. His hands shook slightly on the keyboard. He closed the expense report, a sour taste in his mouth. This was beyond coincidence. Still, Jack's rational mind demanded one more piece of evidence, something undeniably personal. Numbers on a page could be explained away, but words spoken in unguarded moments might reveal the truth. And fate, cruel as it was, delivered that very opportunity. 2 nights later, Jack found himself wandering a deserted terminal corridor at midnight, checking on a delayed flight. The concourse lights were dimmed, the shops shuttered for the night. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor as he passed Gate 14, en route to the dispatch office after grabbing paperwork from a ground crew supervisor. In the distance, he spotted a familiar silhouette near a bank of idle departure monitors. Maya, phone pressed to her ear, her roller suitcase by her side. She was still in her navy blue flight attendant uniform, having arrived on a late flight from Chicago. Jack slipped into the shadows behind a pillar, curious and uneasy. At this hour, who could she be talking to so intently? A nearly empty airport corridor late at night, fluorescent lights reflecting off glossy floors and deserted gate areas. In this silence, private words can carry far. As Jack stepped closer, he could make out Maya's voice, soft but urgent. "I know. I feel it too," she said quietly. A pause. Jack's pulse throbbed in his ears. She was unaware of his presence facing away. "These layovers, they're the only thing keeping me sane," Maya continued. Jack edged a bit closer, keeping behind a structural column. Maya's next words came out in a tender whisper that cut Jack to the core. "You're my rock out here, you know? I don't know what I'd do without you." Her tone was one of affection and dependence, a tone Jack hadn't heard from her in a long time, certainly not directed at him. Jack's blood ran cold. "My rock." The phrase reverberated in his mind. Maya often used to call him her rock years ago when he supported her through tough times. Hearing it now aimed at someone else confirmed everything. Jack didn't need to hear the other person's name. He knew it had to be Reed on the line, perhaps calling from his hotel room or wherever he was. Jack's hands balled into fists. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion. It was speaking to him from the darkness of this empty terminal. Maya ended the call after a few more hushed assurances and hung up. In that moment, Jack almost revealed himself, almost confronted her in the deserted corridor under the harsh fluorescent lights. His heart hammered against his ribs, and anger surged, hot and pulsing. He imagined striding out, demanding she repeat those words to his face. My rock. The audacity, the cruelty of saying that to another man while standing practically in their workplace, our workplace, made him feel physically ill. He took a breath and steadied himself against the pillar. Maya stood there a moment, shoulders slumped as if weighed by a conflict. She sighed and began to walk, pulling her suitcase toward the employee exit. Jack shrank back, holding his breath as she passed just a dozen feet from him. In the dim light, he caught a glimpse of her face, troubled, eyes moist as if she'd been crying or was about to. For a split second, his heart wavered. This was the woman he loved, the mother of his child. She looked vulnerable and conflicted. Why, Maya, he thought. Why Reed? But as quickly as pity arose, it was drowned by the image of her smiling in hotel bars with Reed, whispering in the dark on overnight flights, and by the echo of my rock still stabbing at his heart. Jack remained hidden until Maya disappeared through the doors. Only then did he exhale the breath he'd been holding. Under the harsh lights of the empty corridor, Jack made a vow to himself. He wouldn't confront her tonight, not half-cocked, not without a plan. Instead, he would gather incontrovertible proof of the affair and expose them on his terms. Maya and Reed thought they were clever, arranging trysts under the guise of work. But Jack knew the airline systems and FAA rules inside out, and he realized he could use that knowledge to catch them. He straightened his back and walked briskly back to the dispatch office, a newfound resolve in his stride. As he passed the gates, monitors displayed the last few delayed flights of the night. A cleaning crew buffed the floors in the distance. Jack's mind raced with ideas. Simply filing a complaint with HR or confronting them might lead to denials or a messy scandal. No, he thought, he needed a cleaner, more definitive form of justice. He would methodically gather evidence and then use the very structure of the airline and federal aviation laws to his advantage. They had made their secret personal. He would make their consequences professional. In the silent dispatch center, Jack sat down at his station, heart still aching but mind sharpening to a fine point. On the wall hung a photo of his family, him, Maya, and their daughter on her high school graduation day, all smiles. Jack forced himself to look at it, to remember what was at stake. Their family had been built on trust and love. Now that foundation was cracked and crumbling. Maya's betrayal had ruined their marriage and broken his heart, but Jack wasn't about to let her and Reed walk away unscathed. If they wanted to carry out an affair under the cover of airline duty, then the airline's unforgiving rules would be the weapon of his revenge. Jaw set, Jack began formulating a plan. The first phase: document everything without tipping them off. The second: strike at precisely the right moment. One that would derail their comfortable routine and expose their misdeeds under the bright light of scrutiny. You wanted excitement, Maya? He thought bitterly. Get ready for a dose of real-life turbulence. That night, as the clock pushed past 1 a.m., Jack quietly made copies of the paper logbook pages that showed Maya and Reed arranging to fly together. With his smartphone, he photographed the entries in the archive binder, their signatures side by side, times and dates correlating to her sick call charade. He then accessed the security system's keycard logs. Every employee badge swipe at secure doors and crew lounges was recorded. With careful querying, Jack extracted data for Reed's and Maya's badges over the past months. Patterns emerged. Late-night swipes into the crew rest lounge well past the hour any other crew had gone, both their IDs registering within minutes of each other. They were meeting in quiet corners of the airport too, not just on layovers. One record in particular made Jack's stomach turn. 2:17 a.m. 3 weeks ago, Maya's keycard access to an out-of-service jet parked overnight at a remote gate, followed at 2:21 a.m. by Reed's. They'd unlocked the jet door using their crew access, likely for a private rendezvous on an empty aircraft. The very aircraft steps where years ago, Jack had once surprised Maya with a bouquet after she finished a flight, whispering, "I love you," as planes taxied in the background, now repurposed for her infidelity. Jack's vision blurred with rage at that thought. He printed out the keycard log excerpts quietly at a network printer, then slipped the sheets into his briefcase along with the photographed logbook pages. Each new piece of evidence was a stab of pain, but also steel fortification for his resolve. He now had a trove: schedule records, expense matches, keycard logs, and the damning overheard conversation ringing in his memory. It was nearly 2:30 a.m. when Jack finally logged off. He sat alone in the dim operations center for a moment, rubbing his tired eyes. He felt anger, betrayal, hurt, but also a grim satisfaction. The first phase of his plan was complete. He had gathered the proof. Now, he had to plan the perfect revenge, one that fit the crime, one that would send a clear message to Maya and Reed through the very world in which they'd sinned. No violence, no screaming matches, just cold, hard consequences delivered by the book. Jack's expertise in airline operations and FAA regulations was about to become his weapon. Before leaving, Jack carefully locked the evidence in his desk drawer. He looked again at the family photo on his desk. Our family will never be the same, he thought, a lump in his throat. Their daughter, Emily, was safe at college, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break at home. Jack wasn't sure how or when he would tell her that their lives were about to change forever. He hoped to spare her the ugliest details. But one thing was certain. Maya's betrayal would not remain a secret much longer. Jack shut off the desk lamp and headed out. The terminal was empty now, only the hum of floor polishers and distant announcements echoing. As he walked through the same corridor where he'd overheard Maya's call, he steeled himself. The memory of her tender tone with Reed cut deep, but he forced his focus on what came next. He would fight for his dignity and expose the truth, but he would do it with calculation, not wrath. Straightforward, without a hint of doubt, he told himself. The groundwork was laid. Now it was time to move into Phase 2. Act 2. Gathering proof and escalation. Documenting the affair. Over the next week, Jack moved like a man with a secret mission. By day, he performed his duties at the airline with professional calm, coordinating crew schedules and handling operational snags. By night, he became a detective, piecing together the full picture of Maya and Reed's affair. He established a routine to avoid suspicion. A quick dinner at home with Maya, when she wasn't flying. Polite small talk about each other's day, then back to the office or ostensibly off to bed with his laptop to catch up on reports. In reality, Jack was combing through archived flight plans, crew communications, and maintenance records, any detail that might provide leverage. One evening, Jack came across an odd entry in the maintenance log of an aircraft frequently flown by Reed. It noted a minor oil pressure fluctuation on a flight last month. The notation read, "Oil pressure gauge reading low for 2 minutes on climb, then normalized. Pilot notified MX control. No action taken. Monitor on next flight." Jack copied this information into his notebook, a faint idea forming in his mind. A minor unresolved issue like that would normally be watched, but not immediately fixed if it seemed to self-correct. However, any persistent safety concern, if flagged properly, could ground a plane until thoroughly inspected. Jack tapped his pen on the desk, considering the possibilities. At home, things remained tense but superficially normal between him and Maya. Maya seemed preoccupied, often texting on her phone with a slight smile or furrowed brow. She spoke of work in generic terms, never mentioning Reed by name. But Jack noticed the way she'd say, "my captain," when referring to a recent flight, a subtle proprietary tone that wasn't there before. Each time she did, Jack felt a pang of anger. He bit his tongue and played the part of the tired, oblivious husband. He wondered if she suspected anything. So far, her behavior suggested she believed she was getting away with it. That only steeled Jack's determination more. Late one Friday night, Maya was asleep in their bedroom, having returned from a 3-day trip with Jack knew Reed. Jack sat in his home office, the door slightly ajar, and opened his personal laptop. On the screen glowed an email draft he'd been carefully wording for the past 2 days, an anonymous tip to the airline's ethics and compliance department about possible, unauthorized manipulations in crew scheduling. He described suspicious patterns of a certain captain and attendant always ending up together, hinting at someone abusing access. He kept it vague enough to avoid it being traced to him, but detailed enough to prompt an audit. Before sending, however, Jack hesitated. A formal internal investigation might entangle many people and could be slow. Worse, it might tip off Maya and Reed too early that someone was onto them. And if asked, Jack would either have to lie or come clean. No. This path, while tempting, ceded control to others. Jack wasn't ready to do that. He deleted the draft. He needed something more direct, something that he alone orchestrated, so that the hammer would fall at a time of his choosing. Crafting realistic revenge. The idea came to him fully formed the next morning as he sipped coffee at the kitchen table. Maya was humming lightly by the sink, unusually cheerful for 6 a.m. She just glanced at her phone. Likely a good morning text from Reed, Jack thought bitterly. He watched her for a moment, restraining the urge to confront her right there. Instead, he cleared his throat. "I'll be in early today." "We've got a VIP charter flight to prep," he lied calmly. It wasn't exactly a lie. A VIP charter was scheduled soon, but not that day. Maya barely looked up. "Okay, have a good day," she said casually. No concern, no curiosity. Jack realized at that moment how far apart they truly were. Once upon a time, she'd have pouted about him leaving early on a Saturday or insisted he have another coffee with her. Now she was lost in her own world. No more, he resolved inwardly. It was time. At the office, Jack dove into the flight assignments for the upcoming week. Sure enough, there it was. Flight 580, the high-visibility VIP flight in 3 days' time, a special nonstop from their city to Washington, D.C., carrying a group of tech executives to a conference. The CEO of a partner company and even a congressman were slated to be on board. The flight had been mentioned in management meetings as one to absolutely ensure on-time performance and smooth operation. It was Reed's turn in the monthly roster rotation to helm a VIP flight, and Maya was listed as the lead attendant for that flight crew. Jack almost smiled at how perfect it was. They would be together in a very public, high-stakes setting. If ever there was a stage to make their downfall noticeable, this was it. Jack's plan crystallized. He would use his inside knowledge to ground that flight at the last moment, causing a cascade of consequences that neither Maya nor Reed could escape. And he would do it in a way that looked completely routine, as if fate itself, or rather, regulations and safety protocols, intervened. He spent the next 2 days setting the trap. First, he pulled up the maintenance records for the aircraft scheduled to operate Flight 580, a nearly new Boeing 737 MAX, tail number N8827K. It was a reliable plane with no serious issues since its induction. But Jack found what he needed. That minor oil pressure variance note from a month ago was indeed on this aircraft's log. It had been fine since, likely a minor sensor glitch, but it was a real entry. Jack knew that under FAA regulations, any potential safety discrepancy must be addressed or the flight cannot be released. A dispatcher has the authority to delay or cancel a flight if safety is in question, and maintenance items that aren't resolved are automatic red flags. Normally, something this small would be deferred under the MEL, minimum equipment list, and rechecked later. But if Jack could raise the specter of a serious issue, no captain or maintenance chief would dare ignore it. He composed a maintenance service request in the airline's internal system, crafting the language carefully. Aircraft N8827K. Report of intermittent oil pressure gauge fluctuation during climb. Possible sensor fault or genuine pressure variation. Recommend detailed inspection per Chapter 79 of Maintenance Manual before next flight. He added references to oil system checks and included the original log date as a point of concern, implying the issue had lingered unaddressed. Crucially, he marked it with a high priority code that would typically be used by a pilot write-up requiring immediate attention. Jack paused, reviewing the request. It had to go through normal channels without pointing back to him. He set the originator as Operations Dispatch Safety Flag, a category meant for dispatchers to raise concerns gleaned from flight crew reports. Being the operations manager, he was authorized to input such safety flags. He double-checked the routing. It would send an alert directly to maintenance control and the FAA liaison, as per protocol, and automatically add the note to the dispatch release system. By doing this through official channels, he ensured a legitimate paper trail. It would look like any other caution raised in good faith. Satisfied, Jack hit Submit. Within minutes, he saw the maintenance request pop up on the shared dashboard used by dispatch and maintenance. A maintenance supervisor on duty replied electronically, Rect Ops Safety Flag for N8827K. We'll schedule inspection ASAP. Jack exhaled slowly. Phase 2 was in motion. Tension builds. The morning of Flight 580 arrived crisp and clear. Jack had barely slept the night before, his nerves jangling between anticipation and the weight of what was about to happen. He arrived at the operations center at 5 a.m., hours before the flight, under the pretense of ensuring all was perfect for the VIPs. In reality, He wanted to be on hand to watch it all unfold. From his station, he could monitor the aircraft status board. At 5:30 a.m., a yellow light blinked on for aircraft N 8827K maintenance in progress. He clicked it. A mechanic's note indicated they had begun the detailed oil system inspection Jack's flag had demanded. Estimated completion, 8 a.m., just an hour before scheduled departure at 9 a.m. Good, Jack thought. They're taking it seriously. At 6:15 a.m., as dawnlight began to seep into the terminal, Captain Reed arrived at the dispatch desk to review the flight plan. Jack watched from across the room, staying partly in shadow behind a row of monitors. Reed looked sharp and confident in his pressed uniform, cap under his arm. One of the flight dispatchers handed him the preliminary briefing. Reed scanned the paperwork, then frowned and pointed at the maintenance line. Jack could imagine the conversation. What's this about an oil pressure inspection? Reed stepped away to make a phone call, likely to maintenance control for more info. A few minutes later, he was pacing, not as relaxed as before. Jack felt a grim satisfaction. Reed had been expecting a routine, perhaps even triumphant morning flying VIPs. Now there was a snag he hadn't anticipated. And for all his charm, Reed could not simply brush off a flagged maintenance item. FAA rules were clear. If a plane had an unresolved mechanical question, it could not take off until cleared. Reed knew that. Every pilot did. At 7 a.m., Maya and the rest of the cabin crew checked in at the crew lounge. Jack saw her through the glass partition as she breezed in, rolling her suitcase, looking every bit the impeccable flight attendant in her Navy uniform and smart updo. Under different circumstances, Jack would have admired how professional she appeared. Now it just turned his stomach. He noticed Maya glancing around, likely looking for Reed. Perhaps they intended to grab a coffee together before boarding. Reed, however, was still tied up with maintenance discussions. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Morning. Apparently our plane's under extra inspection. Rumor is flight might delay. You hear anything? The casual tone belied, Jack suspected, a swirling anxiety beneath. It was rare for a flight with VIPs to face last-minute delays. She likely hoped Jack could pull strings to keep things on schedule, or at least tell her it was nothing. Jack stared at her message. For a fleeting moment, old habits tugged at him. He almost replied to reassure her, as he'd done countless times over the years during irregular ops, using his position to smooth her worries. But then he remembered why this was happening. Instead, he responded with deliberate neutrality. Check your logs. He watched from afar as Maya, phone in hand, furrowed her brow at his cryptic reply. She typed back almost instantly. Jack, what? What logs? He did not answer. Instead, Jack walked over to the dispatch counter where Reed stood. It was time to be present for the fireworks. Jack greeted a few coworkers calmly, pouring himself a coffee. Reed gave him a distracted nod, still on the phone with a maintenance tech. Jack pretended to skim some papers while listening. I don't care if the oil pressure's fine now, Reed was saying tightly. We have a plane load of important people, and we need to depart on time. Is there any way to expedite this inspection? A pause. Reed ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated by the answer he got. All right. Keep me updated. He hung up and muttered a curse under his breath. Then he noticed Jack nearby and forced a smile. Morning, Jack. Crazy stuff, huh? They've got my bird under a microscope for some oil gauge hiccup that happened ages ago. Jack sipped his coffee, meeting Reed's eyes with a calm he didn't truly feel. Better safe than sorry, right? VIPs or not, nobody wants to risk a flight if there's a potential issue. He said it pointedly. Reed squinted slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face at Jack's tone. Well, of course, safety first, Reed nodded slowly. The timing couldn't be worse. He gave a charming half-chuckle, trying to ease the tension. Murphy's Law, I guess. The one morning everything needs to go perfectly. A snag comes up, Jack finished, managing a thin smile. Happens to the best of us, Captain. He rarely addressed Reed by his title in casual conversation, but today it felt appropriate. A subtle reminder of Reed's responsibility. Reed opened his mouth as if to say something else, but just then, a maintenance supervisor approached with an update. Captain Reed, we're still running diagnostics. We found trace moisture around a sensor. Could be a crack. We've called in a backup mechanic team. Earliest we can clear is looking like 9:30 a.m. Reed stiffened. That's beyond our departure time. We'll be late. Or worse, he said, voice tight. The supervisor shrugged apologetically. I know, but we can't in good conscience sign off until we're 100%. You know the drill. The man offered a respectful nod and moved off. Reed looked as if he'd bitten into a lemon. Jack felt a dark satisfaction bloom inside him. The flight was effectively grounded for now. The passengers, important passengers, would soon be informed of a delay, maybe even a swap to a different aircraft if one could be arranged. Either scenario was embarrassing for the airline on a day it wanted to shine. Nearby, through the lounge door, Jack glimpsed Maya speaking with one of her fellow flight attendants. A moment later, as news filtered to the cabin crew, Maya stepped out and approached the dispatch desk, worry evident on her face. When she saw Jack, she looked both relieved and anxious, as if hoping her husband's presence could solve this. Jack, she called out softly as she neared, careful to maintain professional decorum in front of others. They're saying our flight is grounded pending maintenance? Why now? This plane was fine yesterday. Jack regarded her coolly. Up close, he saw the slight dark circles under her eyes, perhaps from late-night phone calls or lack of sleep. She looked beautiful in her uniform, and the familiarity of her features tugged at his heart. But he steeled himself, recalling the hushed, "My rock" he'd overheard. She was desperate now, but not for him. She was desperate because her illicit plans were unraveling. Check your logs, Jack repeated evenly, his words meant for her ears alone. His gaze flicked to the crew log binder she clutched. Each crew often carried a flight assignment log. Sometimes the answer is right there in front of you. Maya's brow knit in confusion and frustration. What are you talking about? Jack, can't you just tell me what's going on? She pleaded in a hushed tone. Jack took a sip of coffee instead of answering directly, then said louder, I'm sure maintenance will sort it out, Maya. In the meantime, maybe review the flight logbook and crew schedules in detail. Might shed light on things. His eyes bore into hers with meaning. For a moment, Maya just stared back, her face slowly draining of color as an understanding seemed to dawn. She clutched the binder to her chest. Did she sense that this was no random event? Jack could almost see the gears turning behind her eyes. Before Maya could respond, a commotion at the boarding gate visible through the windows drew everyone's attention. Several passengers in business suits were congregating, and a couple of news cameras were present, local press covering the VIP's departure. Jack saw a well-dressed man he recognized as the tech CEO frowning while an airline customer service rep explained something. The congressman stood off to the side, checking his watch. Clearly, word was out that Flight 580 was delayed. One of the news camera operators started filming the idling aircraft on the tarmac, narrating perhaps about an unexpected delay due to maintenance issues on the VIP flight. This was turning into the very public spectacle Jack had anticipated. He felt a slight pang of sympathy, not for Reed or Maya, but for the airline's PR folks who would have to spin this. Still, it was a contained safety issue on record. No one could fault the airline for being cautious. If questioned, the narrative would be simple. A minor mechanical irregularity flagged by a vigilant ops manager prompted an inspection. It was by the book, exactly as Jack intended. Confrontation pressure. Reed slammed a clipboard down on the dispatch counter, jolting Jack's attention back. Unbelievable, Reed muttered under his breath, perhaps not meaning to be loud, but too frustrated to care. We might have to swap planes or cancel at this rate. They can't find a backup easily for a charter like this. This will be a circus. He noticed Maya then, standing beside Jack looking pale and troubled. Reed managed a reassuring smile for her. Don't worry, Maya. Worst case, we'll get another plane and still get them there, just a bit late. His tone was soothing, the way one might calm a concerned partner. It made Jack's skin crawl. Maya didn't smile back. In fact, she looked at Reed almost painfully, then at Jack. I'll be right back, she stammered, clutching her binder. Without waiting for reply, she hurried back towards the jet bridge and onto the plane, presumably to retrieve something, or maybe to confer with the rest of the crew out of earshot. Jack watched her go, then glanced at Reed, who was watching her too, concern and love evident in his eyes. That look alone might not have confirmed an affair to an outsider, but to Jack it was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. Reed cared for her. That much was obvious. Jack's jaw tightened. It was time for the final act of his plan, the public reckoning. He left the dispatch counter and headed towards his office down the hall where he'd left the compiled evidence. On the way, he passed the operations manager for the shift, his deputy, who was busy fielding calls from higher-ups about the delay. The deputy gave Jack a quizzical look. Jack just waved a hand, saying he was grabbing a file. He entered his small office and opened a side cabinet. Inside was the logbook pages and keycard records he had collected. Jack carefully laid them open on his desk, like exhibits awaiting the accused. From his office window, which overlooked part of the gate area, Jack saw Maya step off the jet bridge. To his surprise, she was flipping through her crew assignment binder feverishly, the very binder that held printed schedules and notes for the month. Perhaps his cryptic instruction had gotten to her. She slowed her pace, eyes scanning a particular page. Even from a distance, Jack recognized it, the master crew schedule, where one could see pairings. Maya stopped walking completely, standing in a corner of the gate area away from passengers. Her hand covered her mouth. Jack imagined the pattern leaping out at her. She was seeing exactly what he'd seen, her name and Reed's, over and over, flagged together in neon clarity. And near those entries, perhaps she kept notes, some flight attendants did, which might even include references to swapping shifts or personal notations like GR requests or hearts or something incriminating. Whatever she saw, it was hitting her. He could see her shoulders tremble slightly. Maya slowly lowered the binder, staring at the ground as if dizzy. Then she turned abruptly and made a beeline. Not back to the crew, not to Reed, but toward the ops offices. Toward him. Jack stepped away from the window and sat behind his desk, the logs and records spread out neatly. His heart raced. The confrontation was imminent. A moment later, Maya appeared at his door. She paused there, closing it behind her. For a beat, neither spoke. Maya's eyes flicked down to Jack's desk, where the evidence lay in plain view. Photographs of logbook pages with her and Reed's handwriting and signatures, printouts of keycard timestamps, and highlighted schedule printouts. They were damning. Maya's face crumpled as she took it in. Jack, she began, her voice breaking. What is this? It was a stupid question. She knew exactly what it was. Perhaps what she really meant was, how did you get this? Or how long have you known? She took a tentative step forward, tears welling in her eyes. I can explain. It's not what it looks like. Jack raised a hand sharply, stopping her. The calm that he had maintained all morning was now laced with unmistakable bitterness. Not what it looks like? He echoed. His voice was low, each word measured. Maya, it looks like you and Captain Reed have been manipulating your schedules to be together, on overnight trips for months. It looks like you both used company systems, and my trust, to conduct an affair under the pretense of work. Maya flinched as if struck. We never meant for it to... She stepped closer, desperation in her eyes. Jack, please. I'm so sorry. A tear spilled down her cheek. It just happened. After Emily left, I felt so empty, and you were always so busy. Jack's face hardened. It was the first time she had even attempted to discuss the root of it, but he wasn't interested in justifications right now. And so you filled the void by shattering our marriage vows? He snapped, a flash of raw pain breaking through his otherwise controlled demeanor. With him? Here? At our workplace? Lying to everyone? Maya sobbed quietly, wiping her cheek. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know what I thought. Grant was just there for me to talk to, and it spiraled. I didn't know how to stop. Jack interjected with an icy chuckle. You knew exactly how to stop. You chose not to. He pointed at the array of evidence on the desk. Every one of these entries is a choice. Your choice. His choice. You both vouched for this, he said, tapping the photo of the logbook where their signatures sat side by side. Every time you signed in together or unlocked a door at 2 a.m., don't stand there and tell me it just happened. Maya looked down at the desk, silent tears dripping onto one of the papers. She seemed unable to tear her eyes from the evidence of her own betrayal laid bare. The silence in the small office was heavy, broken only by the muffled sounds of the airport beyond the door. Eventually, Maya spoke, her voice trembling. What are you going to do? It was the question of the hour. She wasn't even attempting to deny it now. She knew she was caught. Instead, she sounded genuinely afraid. Of Jack's answer, of the consequences already unfolding outside. Jack felt a surge of conflicted emotion. Part of him wanted to scream at her, to unleash all the hurt and anger. Another part just felt an overwhelming sadness at this pathetic, broken moment between them. But he kept his tone level. It's already done, Maya, he said quietly. The airline will handle it from here. The rules you broke, the trust you violated, none of that is just between us now. You wanted to play with fire on the tarmac. Now the FAA and company policy will bring the heat. As if on cue, a knock sounded and the door opened. It was the director of flight operations, looking grave. Behind him stood two individuals, the airline's HR manager and an FAA safety inspector wearing a badge on his jacket. They had arrived in response to the mounting situation with the delayed flight. Jack, sorry to interrupt, the director began, then stopped as he took in the scene, Maya in tears, the documents on the desk. He clearly realized he had walked into something sensitive. Jack stood, straightening his tie. It's all right, Dan, he addressed the director, and then deliberately began gathering the papers on his desk into a folder. We were just reviewing some logs related to this incident. He fixed a meaningful look on the director, who nodded slowly, understanding there was more than met the eye. The FAA inspector stepped forward gently. Captain Reed has been asked to step out of the cockpit and wait in the conference room, he said, addressing both Jack and Maya. We need to ask a few questions about the maintenance flag and review some documentation. His eyes fell to the folder Jack was holding. Jack handed it over without a word. The inspector flipped it open briefly, brow furrowing as he saw the contents. He likely didn't fully grasp the context yet, but he saw enough to know it was important. Thank you, he said. Maya opened her mouth as if to protest the folder's handover, but no sound came. This was the moment her private transgressions became a public matter. The HR manager, a woman with a sympathetic but firm expression, touched Maya's arm. Maya, I think it's best you come with us, she said softly. Maya looked at Jack, eyes pleading, but Jack's face was impassive, stony. He simply said, You should go with them. His voice almost cracked, but he held firm. Shoulders shaking, Maya allowed herself to be escorted out by the HR manager, the FAA inspector following. The director of flight ops remained a moment, meeting Jack's eyes. This looks serious, he said under his breath. Jack only nodded. The director sighed. We'll talk later. And he left, closing the door, leaving Jack alone in the silence. Act 3. Public Reckoning and Aftermath Exposure. In the ensuing hours, the full scope of Jack's calculated revenge played out. The VIP Flight 580 was officially canceled. There was no spare aircraft readily available that could take over in time. The important passengers were rebooked on later flights or charters amid much apology from the airline. News outlets that had come to film the takeoff instead ran stories on the delay. While the official statement cited a mechanical issue as the cause, leaks from an inside source hinted at deeper drama. By afternoon, a few industry gossip sites were abuzz with a tantalizing story. Flight canceled due to love affair? Unconfirmed reports suggest a mid-sized airline grounded a flight amid an investigation into crew misconduct. Within the airline, everything moved swiftly. The evidence Jack provided, combined with Maya and Reed's own admissions, faced with logs they couldn't deny, led to immediate professional consequences. Captain Grant Reed was relieved of duties pending investigation. As per FAA procedure, his airman certificate was suspended indefinitely, meaning he was grounded with no flying privileges until he could demonstrate he met all standards required of a pilot. An indefinite suspension is effectively career purgatory. Reed would have to undergo thorough evaluations and answer to a review board about any misconduct. Whether his offense was phrased as falsification of records or conduct unbecoming, the effect was the same. Reed's shining career was now marred, his wings clipped at least for the foreseeable future. Reporters caught wind of the fact that the captain of the flight was pulled from the cockpit by an FAA inspector, which only fueled speculation. Was it drug use? A health issue? They didn't know. The truth of an illicit affair was only whispered in back channels. Maya fared no better. The airline suspended her immediately for unauthorized access and manipulation of crew schedules, pending a formal hearing. Essentially, she was accused of abusing company systems for personal reasons, a serious policy violation. Security escorted her from the crew area shortly after her meeting with HR. She walked out of the building in her neatly pressed uniform, rolling suitcase behind her, but this time it was not to catch a flight. It was a walk of shame under escort. A few colleagues gawked from a distance, having heard bits and pieces. Maya kept her eyes down, face flushed with a mix of humiliation and grief. Jack watched her leave from the second-floor operations balcony, unseen by her. There was no triumphant glee in him, no sense of victory, only a heavy, profound sadness, tempered by grim satisfaction that justice, as he saw it, had been served. He had orchestrated a reckoning that neither Maya nor Reed could escape. They'd played with the rules and underestimated him. Now the rules themselves exacted punishment. As she disappeared from view, Jack closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the sting of tears but blinked them away. There would be time for private sorrow later. For now, he had to finish what he started. Inside the airline offices, there were follow-up meetings. Jack provided a formal statement describing how he noticed irregularities in the logs and, acting out of safety concerns, issued the maintenance flag. He carefully framed it as fulfilling his duty, which was technically true. He had not lied about the oil pressure variance, only amplified its importance. His colleagues regarded him with a mix of sympathy and respect as bits of the personal story emerged. Management, initially upset about the flight disruption, had to admit that Jack's flag was within bounds. FAA regulations supported his decision to delay the flight for safety. In an ironic twist, some higher-ups praised Jack for his sharp eye in catching a potentially overlooked issue, not realizing the personal vendetta that had driven his vigilance. Jack accepted these words with a polite nod, but said little. He felt a twinge of guilt for the collateral inconvenience and for deceiving his bosses about his true motive, but he reasoned that safety was never truly compromised. He simply forced an abundance of caution. Meanwhile, Reed had to face the FAA inquiry. In a sterile conference room, confronted with the evidence from Jack's folder, Reed reportedly hung his head and confessed to altering a schedule entry and meeting Maya outside of work protocols. The FAA inspector didn't care about the romantic aspect per se, but any falsification of official records, like that paper logbook or misuse of access, was a grave matter. It cast doubt on Reed's judgment. Perhaps out of shock or some remaining decency, Reed took on the majority of the blame, asserting that he had initiated the scheduling tricks and that Maya just went along out of fear or love. Maya corroborated that in her own statement, though HR knew she was a willing participant. The fine details of who influenced whom were ultimately irrelevant to the outcome. Both had breached trust and protocol. By early evening, the dust was settling. The airline issued internal notices. Captain Reed was on indefinite leave pending further review. Flight attendant Maya Martin was suspended pending termination proceedings. The official reasons were couched in HR speak about policy violations. But rumors flew among staff. In break rooms and text chains, the story formed. Jack Martin discovered his wife's affair with Reed and engineered an epic, non-violent revenge that grounded a jet. Some were incredulous. It sounded like a movie plot. But as more pieces came out, many found a dark admiration for Jack's approach. In an industry that thrived on precision and rules, he had used those very mechanisms to exact payback. It was almost poetic. Legal consequences, too, began to loom beyond just the job. Jack, now alone in his office, dialed a number he never thought he would: a divorce attorney. In many U.S. states, adultery can influence divorce settlements, especially if marital assets were used to conduct the affair, and those hotel charges suggested they were. Jack didn't particularly care about punishing Maya through the courts. The public unraveling of her career felt like consequence enough. But he did want a clean break and to ensure his daughter's college funds and his savings were protected from any fallout. The attorney agreed to meet him the next day. Jack hung up, feeling a hollowness at making official what his heart had already accepted. His marriage was over. As twilight fell, Jack stood by a large window overlooking the tarmac. The gate where Flight 580 had been was now empty, the aircraft still in the hangar for inspection. The VIPs were long gone on alternate transport. A sense of loneliness washed over him. This morning, he had been a man on a mission, fueled by adrenaline and anger. Now, in the quiet aftermath, he was just a man who had lost his partner. Maya's belongings and presence were absent from the building now, and he realized they would be absent from his home soon as well. He thought of their daughter, Emily. She would be getting a call no parent wants to make. "Your mother and I are separating." Perhaps it was cowardly, but he decided to wait a day or two, let the immediate chaos pass before telling her. Emotional closure. Jack cleared out his desk, mechanically organizing papers and powering down his terminal. On the corner of the desk lay the logbook he had closed on their affair. He ran a hand over its cover. This logbook was once a symbol of coordination and teamwork. Now, to him, it symbolized deceit and also justice. In a swift motion, he picked it up and placed it back on the shelf with other records. Another closed case. He took his jacket and exited the office. The dispatch center was nearly empty now, just a few night shift folks quietly working. The events of the day had left a sobering impression on everyone. As he walked through, one of the younger dispatchers looked up. "Take care, Jack," the young man offered kindly. Jack mustered a faint smile and nod. Before leaving the building, Jack paused near the dispatch floor one last time. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on the rows of desks and screens. It struck him that this was the exact tableau he had imagined in his revenge fantasies. Him standing victorious under these lights after using the system to punish the guilty. And indeed, he had succeeded. But it didn't feel purely like victory. It felt like a necessary, sorrowful act, like putting down something you loved that had turned rabid. The rules of the airline had delivered retribution, but they could not heal his broken heart. He stepped outside into the crisp night air. Across the employee parking lot, he noticed a solitary figure by the curb, Maya. She sat on her suitcase, still in her uniform, eyes red from crying. Perhaps she was waiting for a taxi or a friend to pick her up. She looked utterly forlorn, illuminated by the harsh sodium lights of the terminal exterior. For a moment, Jack's resolve wavered. This was the woman he had loved for 2 decades, the mother of his child. Her shoulders shook with sobs, even as she tried to keep a semblance of composure in public. Jack drew a breath and walked toward his car, which was parked not far from where she sat. He couldn't avoid passing her. As he did, Maya looked up. Their eyes met. In hers, Jack saw a mix of anguish, apology, and longing. In his, Maya would see pain and exhaustion, but also a hardened finish that she perhaps had never seen before. She stood up unsteadily. "Jack," she whispered. It wasn't a call to stop, but a lament, as if that single word carried all her regret. He paused a few feet from her. The night was silent, except for the distant roar of a jet on takeoff and the hum of a nearby street lamp. Jack searched for anything to say. A part of him wanted to hug her, to cry with her over the wreckage of their life. Another part wanted to lash out, ask, was he worth it? But he did neither. Instead, he managed quietly, "Take care of yourself, Maya." It was devoid of malice, but also of warmth. It was a farewell. Maya's face crumpled and fresh tears fell. She seemed to want to say something more, perhaps beg forgiveness, perhaps declare love. But Jack gave a slight shake of his head. There was nothing left to discuss now. Not here. Their marriage was effectively over, the moment drawn like a curtain between acts. Jack continued on to his car. He didn't look back, even though he could hear Maya softly weeping again. It took all his strength to keep moving forward. He unlocked his vehicle, got in, and sat for a moment gripping the steering wheel. He realized his hands were trembling. The enormity of the day's events finally caught up to him in full. With a shuddering breath, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He rested his forehead on the wheel as a wave of emotions rolled through him. Sorrow for what was lost, anger at Maya's choices, relief that it was finally out in the open, and a profound loneliness. After a few minutes, Jack straightened up. He started the engine and pulled out of the lot. As he drove past the terminal one last time, he glimpsed the spot where Maya had been. She was gone. A taxi's taillights were just visible disappearing around the curve. Jack felt a pang, but he knew it was for the best. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past the windows. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He checked it at a red light. It read, "Mr. Martin, this is Detective Flores from Airport Police. Just to confirm, we've closed out the incident report as requested. No further action on our end. Thank you for your cooperation." Jack had almost forgotten. Earlier, as part of standard procedure, Airport Police had been looped in when HR documented unauthorized system access, since technically it could be considered a cyber or security offense. Jack had downplayed any need for criminal charges. Neither he nor the airline truly wanted to press charges against Maya. Firing and disgrace were enough. He was glad to confirm the police considered it a closed matter. He deleted the message. Arriving home to an empty, quiet house, Jack felt the weight of solitude. The hallways were dark. A picture of the three of them at Disney World years ago hung on the wall. They looked so happy. Jack stood before it, the silence pressing in. This home, once filled with laughter and family dinners, would soon be just his. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of whiskey, neat. He sat at the dining table, where not long ago he and Maya had shared meals and benign conversations, even as the love decayed under the surface. He wondered if any of that time she had felt guilty, or if she had simply compartmentalized her double life entirely. Perhaps one day he'd get those answers, but he wasn't sure he wanted them now. Jack raised his glass in a solitary toast. "To the truth," he murmured, and drank. The amber liquid burned down his throat, warming the cold knot in his chest just a little. In the days that followed, the aftermath settled. Reed quietly resigned before the company could formally fire him. Rumor had it he planned to attempt the long road to reinstating his pilot's license once the FAA's suspension period and scrutiny passed, but his shining reputation was irreparably tarnished. Maya, for her part, met with HR for a final review. With union representatives present, she opted to resign as well in exchange for the airline not officially blacklisting her credentials. It was a small mercy. She might, in a few years, find work at a smaller airline if she chose, but this chapter was done. Legally, Jack and Maya proceeded toward a divorce on grounds of adultery, a relatively straightforward process given the evidence. There would be no messy court battles. Maya didn't contest Jack's terms. Perhaps guilt kept her from fighting. They agreed on an amicable split of assets and shared an understanding to keep things civil for Emily's sake. On a cloudy afternoon 2 weeks later, Jack found himself once more at the airport, but this time as a passenger. He was flying to visit his daughter at her college for the weekend, both to surprise her and to have that difficult heart-to-heart talk in person. As he waited at the gate for his flight, he gazed out at the runways. A plane lifted into the sky, engines roaring, ascending into the thick clouds and disappearing. In that moment, Jack felt a strange kinship with that aircraft. It was heading into uncertain skies, perhaps a storm, but it was moving forward, climbing, pushing through turbulence toward clearer air above. He allowed himself a small, hopeful thought that eventually, like that plane, he too would emerge from the storm. The turbulence of betrayal and revenge was behind him now. What lay ahead would be different, uncharted, but maybe calmer. He had done what he set out to do, exposed the truth, upheld justice in his own way, and reclaimed his self-respect. There was no triumph in it, but there was a sense of resolution. As his flight was called for boarding, Jack took a deep breath and joined the queue, one man among many, carrying only a modest overnight bag. No one around him knew his story. To them, he was just another traveler, and that was fine with him. He gave one last look around the terminal, at the fluorescent lights, the polished floors, the distant figures of crews attending to flights. This place held so many memories for him, both good and bad. It was where his love story with Maya had begun, and where it had spectacularly imploded. It was also where he had found, in the midst of heartbreak, his own strength and resolve. Jack Martin boarded the plane. As he settled into his seat, he thought about the final image of that day. Him leaning back in his dispatch chair after closing the logbook, heart heavy but resolute. That chapter was over. Now, he was determined to chart a new course for himself, one defined not by what he'd lost, but by what he had the courage to overcome. Final image. In the log of Jack's life, a new entry was being written, one not of betrayal or revenge, but of resilience. And as the aircraft taxied and took flight, Jack gazed out the window at the receding airport below, ready to leave the ruins on the tarmac and soar toward his next horizon.